Welcome to the Popcorn Talk Network, for the online broadcast network that features movie discussion, news, and interviews. Press 1.
Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Hello, Internet. This is Lex Michael, Twitter handle at the Lex Michael, and I am here with
Byron Thompson, Twitter at Byron Lee.
And we are watching Cat People, the 1942 horror classic produced by Val Lewton. Real quick, before we jump in, Byron, do you want to tell those of us watching along at home a little bit about this motion picture?
Well, Val Lewton was brought into the RKO unit, which at the time had just done two very successful films, King Kong and Citizen Kane, and he was brought in to do the B unit, which kind of meant they weren't going to give him any money. And he was very irritated that he didn't have anything like Kong or any type of iconic character to deal with, so he tried to approach his B unit with a certain amount of creativity, which I think really shows in this film. Cat
Sure.
People.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was the first of a number of movies he produced for RKO. This is, I would say, to date, one of the more iconic.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna peep this motion picture, and we would like very much for you to peep along with us. Now, we are going to sync up our watching with yours. We're going to give you a countdown in a minute. So get your DVD remotes ready, your iTunes streams prepared. We are going to give you a countdown, and we are going to hit play, and you can watch along with us while we chit-chat over this motion picture. Everybody grab your remotes.
Are we ready, Lex?
We are ready, Steven. We're going to count down
You're gonna do 3, 2, 1, then on go you hit play, guys.
Yes, we're going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then on go we're going to hit play. Everybody prepare your remotes, your mouse trackpad things, and click with us. Ready?
3, 2, 1, go.
And we're off. We're looking at
Iconic RKO Radio Pictures logo.
this radio tower on top of the globe.
Fantastic.
Oh, here we go. All right.
With all of Val Lewton's films, he focused a lot on the imagery,
Yeah.
which we start with the Panther, obviously, for good reason. I think it should be noted as we start here with the credits that this was also one of the first films directed by Jacques Tourneur for the American audiences.
Yes, and he would collaborate with Lewton on 2 more movies for RKO after this one. It was, I believe, I Walked with a Zombie and Leopard Man?
Correct. And he also was always the person who always called Lewton the dreamer.
Ah.
The one that always had his head in the clouds, not really grounded.
We open with this excerpt from The Anatomy of Atavism by Dr. Louis Judd.
In some ways, this kind of sets up the sequel.
And
All the psychology.
That's something that you'll see in a number of these Lewton-produced horror movies, is that they will either open, close, or both with these text excerpts.
Absolutely. And style is such an enormous part of his films, especially the black and white photography and the very kind of subtle, low-key use of camera movement. It's very unassuming, considering it's clearly a horror film.
Well, it is, but we've talked about this a little bit. What's interesting about Lewton's horror movies is that most of them aren't horror movies in the sense that we understand the term now.
Oh, absolutely. It's basically practical people in impractical situations.
Yes.
Things that are beyond their means, things they don't understand at all.
And a lot of the conventions of his movies stylistically fall far more in line with, depending on the movie, noir, say, especially in the case of Cat People.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think Cat People, out of all the projects that he did, is the most noir, almost on purpose, because of the subject matter. The darkness and the way that he basically brings out the Simone Simon character, I just think is fantastic.
Now, this guy, and when I say this guy, I'm referring to
Oliver?
the character of Oliver Reed.
Ollie?
when they remade this movie, and we will talk a little bit about
Sure.
the Schrader remake, but when they remade this movie, they changed his name. He's not Oliver Reed, because by that point, the actor Oliver Reed had established a name for himself. But this character, Oliver Reed, our male lead in the movie, is just the worst. He is just the worst guy.
But yet incredibly successful with ladies, it seems.
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be a problem for him.
Well, he's fascinating because, as you'll see later in the movie, when we're further into the drama of their relationship and we've introduced more of the conflict, his inner turmoil...
And here's a great plant for later for the payoff,
Oh,
obviously.
the dagger through
it's just fantastic. Really smart.
His inner turmoil comes not really out of his love for Irena, although nominally it does. Really, where it seems to come from is the fact that he's never been unhappy before in his life, and he doesn't know how to process being unhappy.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that sets up the whole idea of the love triangle that is completely unpredictable.
Right.
It kind of almost like shows itself without you even ever suspecting. And
Sure.
I think that's very smart.
It's excellent storytelling.
It's not that she's loose.
Right.
It's that she's friendly. That's hugely different. Hugely different. But he's very unacceptable. He doesn't expect that at all. He's like thinking he's failed. And,
Sure.
come on in. Let's have some tea. Lots of shadows.
Lots of shadows.
From the beginning, the whole film is just laced in it. Which the sequel has hardly any. It's not at all like this.
Well, as something else we could talk about too is that the sequel's really, it's a sequel in
name
only.
You were saying that earlier, yeah.
It has
absolutely.
almost yes, the Oliver and the Alice characters come back, and it's the same actors playing the same parts, and you have this ghost of Irena, but it has almost, beyond the character names, it has almost nothing to do with this movie. But it is its own very interesting, distinct entity from it.
They were when Val was undertaking this film for RKO, they were very upset at the fact that he wasn't doing anything extreme. When they were looking at rushes and dailies and stuff, seeing what we're watching right now, they were like, "Well, wait a minute, where's the horror?" They had no concept of his subtle manner, which is very evident in the film. I think he really pulls it off. It's very unassuming, definitely sneaks up on you. Very, very smart.
Yeah, and I understand from the perspective of his superiors when they hired him to make a lot of these movies, especially at first, they were expecting something a little more straightforward, something with a little more boo and eek to it. But this type of terror that Lewton so excelled at was not the jump scare type of terror that modern audiences expect from horror movies. It was a very slow, creeping, psychological sense of being very ill at ease.
It's true horror.
Yeah.
He puts something, like you said, we were talking earlier. We accept this as a couple. They've just met, and it seems no different than maybe when you've met somebody, or perhaps even when I've met somebody, and things go awry very quickly. Everything seems fine, and it's not.
And that very gradually you start to get the suspicion that something isn't fine.
And all the iconography, she's got the leopard, she's got the statue, she's got all these things in her room. It's fantastic. It's such a great setup. You're not too big on him, I take it. I get the impression you kind of think little of him.
Yes, no, not a fan. Not a fan at all. What's interesting, too, is that something that seems to recur in a lot of his movies is there's a specific term for it that I'm forgetting right now, but fears that are tied to the ancestral, that are tied
absolutely.
That are tied to a legacy. I mean, it's here clearly as Irena believes, at the very least, that she's descended from these cat people, and that's what drives her fear. It's true all the way up into the Body Snatcher.
Yes, absolutely.
Where the villain of the Body Snatcher is tied into the backstory and the predecessors of one of the main characters.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think it's unique that you say that in regard to the fact that she seems to have no problems. No physical problems, no mental issues. She seems to just be a beautiful girl.
Oh, Irena.
But all of his problems, which he has plenty,
yes,
they're all analytical within the film. They're all played out with the other characters. He clearly does not have anything together. So you kind of like said, his life is kind of like charmed.
Yeah, to say the
and
least.
it's about to be uncharmed very quickly. So that's kind of exciting. The ancestral. You're right. That's such a big part of this. The past. Because she's Serbian, right? That's the whole context of the film.
Yes.
She's Serbian, and the woman that appears later, they're Serbian. It's like from her country, much like the remake as well.
God, the remake. That's how I came to Lewton in general in the first place. Is I worked backwards. I first discovered the David Bowie song "Cat People," which led me to the Paul Schrader movie, which then led me back to the Lewton movie.
Oh, absolutely. And like I've said, I can't say enough about The Shadows because unlike some of his other films, this one is a pure noir, at least in terms of appearance.
Right. Well, and the shadows play heavily into what you could refer to as the.
Well, it's a setup. For the big payoff.
Right.
Absolutely. Which is great. It's very smart.
In a world where you don't really have the budget to show an aggressive feline attack.
And they didn't get that. But they eventually did, and of course we're very happy. Unless I'm mistaken, this was the most successful film he actually ever did. For his unit and everything. From what my understanding is, from what I've read, I'm not sure what your research shows.
I don't know any different. Just a hair. So this is the introduction of Alice.
I like Alice.
I like Alice too. The only of the trifecta of the main of the trifecta. Of the three main characters of that trifecta, the only one who really grates on me is Oliver.
We'll try to steer clear of him.
I just wonder what these two women see in this self-obsessed simpleton ultimately. I definitely see on the surface he has a certain aw shucks charm to him, but there's not much going on there beyond that.
Yeah, I like the cat's nice touch.
Yeah. Yeah, the cat knows something's not right.
Irena? Is that how you say her name, Lex? Irena?
Irena? Irena. I wonder what they did to the cat to agitate it in that last shot. The girl who works in our department.
It played with her, from what I hear.
There's something so endearingly childlike about this performance.
Of hers?
Yeah.
You know, I think these are the only films she actually made. She wasn't really sought after. But she's great in these. Simone? Is that how you say her name?
Simone Simon. No, now all the animals are freaking out.
This is all bad.
It is, to me, the childlike qualities that she possesses and she displays in this performance that makes it all the more tragic what ultimately happens to her, and the fact that she has to deal with this throughout the story at all, because she's every bit the victim of this circumstance as some of the other characters later fear they will be or doubt they will be.
Oh, absolutely. And there's also an unabiding truth in this film as well as the sequel about she believes in something that no one else believes in.
Right.
As does the little girl in the sequel. It's a very consistent theme in Lewton's work. There is a character in all of his work usually that has some truth that no one will believe, and they constantly in the film try to convince others, no, you don't understand. This is a serious, and everybody ignores. I'm sure you remember, in this film, obviously.
maybe her brother's wife is a cat person.
Perhaps. I think you're more upset about the simpleton nature of all of it.
He's just staring.
But he's got a good heart, and the best part about his character, I think, which you have not said, is he really wants to take care of her, and even if he doesn't even maybe believe her, he's worried about her. He's concerned for her. That's an admirable trait.
I will concede that point absolutely. He means well. He means very well. He just can't help himself.
I'm not even sure if there's anything or person I've disliked that much in my life. But that's okay. I mean, he's no winner. I'll give you that.
Well, and I like the performance a lot.
He's real fresh with her constantly, and she doesn't really seem to be that into it, which is great. It's like real life.
She's just been watching him sleep. It's a little creepy, but
Well, remember when this movie was made, it's not really.
but also she says it. She says that she was watching him with such innocence.
There's a purity to her, for sure.
So now I'm trying to remember this story, this source of her fear, which is that if she becomes intimate with somebody, she will transform into a ferocious cat person and do harm to others. I cannot remember off the top of my head. Do they mention where that comes from in this movie? Is that
It's inferred that it comes from her Serbian background. I don't want to say anything before it happens in the film, but that's kind of where all that comes from. Like you said, the ancestral part. When she's speaking to him already about the statue and all these things, she's very non-specific.
right?
And even now, when he's pushing her clearly to speak, see, which we weren't even privy to that conversation. He was.
Right. So I'm wondering, is this a story that she was told growing up?
And
or
you
is
see, he
this
completely
just-
rejects it.
Right.
Oh, that's just fantasy.
It's nonsense.
That's like a campfire story.
Right.
And she's like looking at him like, so you really don't understand the truth, which is great too. He makes her feel safe, Lex. That's the key here. Safety.
So now, yeah, they've been married.
I think the supporting players are worth mentioning, especially the gentleman at the end of the table who later played the butler, so to speak, on the Batman TV series.
Alan Napier?
Correct.
That's him? Huh.
I'm mentioning that only because in all of Lewton's films, especially this one, all the supporting players are key.
Sure.
There's no one-note players. They're all great characters. They're very fleshed out.
I had no idea that was Alfred.
Lots of smiles.
Lots of smiles. And then this lady.
This to me really speaks to what you were talking about, the ancestral part. Because you don't always have to show or tell the audience everything. She speaks volumes.
Yes. See, now, up with the glasses on, I see it now. My mind is actively exploding.
She looks like a cat, he says.
She literally looks like, and she's
How
wearing.
how fantastic is that?
She's dressed like a cat.
A cat.
with the bow piece on her head. Moja sestra. She looks a bit like the actress, what's her name? Miranda Richardson.
Absolutely.
That's who she looks like.
Absolutely.
And you never really get too much specific information on what that was, other than
What she says.
right. And you get a sense that she feels something towards Irena, but she leaves immediately. So maybe even she's not fully aware. She just senses a connection between the two of them.
But the fear with the crossing and everything, I mean, clearly it's upsetting.
Well, it's like maybe Irena, now that she's been married, there have been these festivities, she's enjoying this relationship. It's like maybe
So
she
to
was...
Ollie, it's just a joke. I mean, you saw how he did.
Oh, the cat people stuff,
He
yeah.
even tapped her on the chin. It's like, oh, come on. It's just. Is it because of how she was dressed?
But it's like that interaction reminds Irena that, oh, I'm not free of this.
Well, I like the fact that she's really stuck, not just in her past, but in her, like you said, her ancestral heritage. But she very carefully doles it out to him. She's not basically telling him any part of the big story.
Right.
Because she clearly sees, well, he doesn't believe this at all.
Right. This poor girl. And it's like you get the sense that he does mean it.
Well,
But
I told you that was the only real selling point to me is he's very sincere and he really does care about
he
her.
does, but it's like at the same time he doesn't realize how incredibly patronizing he's being.
Oh, absolutely. He's very patronizing.
But he means well. So
Well, in a lot of ways, you can look at this as an analogy for any marriage because he's confused
sure.
constantly.
Yeah.
And she's basically kind of dictating how it goes. I'm not being facetious. Most men would say that that's how things began. They weren't prepared for this.
Sure.
They didn't understand that it wasn't going to be the way they wanted it to be.
Right.
And because he's not your favorite type of character, he's kind of weak. He says, I'm going to support that. You can have as much time as you want, which in real life would not necessarily be the case.
Sure. And I do want to make clear, it's not the conception or the execution of this character that I take any issue with whatsoever. I think the way he is written, the way he's worked into the story is great. I think the performance is great. I think everything there is there on purpose, and it's done well. He just is just a very punchable person to me.
Did you just bring violence into this? I thought we were watching a movie. Wow. Beautiful animal.
If I'm not mistaken, they used the same this is a leopard. The same but the same one again in Leopard Man.
Correct.
Same
That's
cat.
absolutely correct.
So this actor, this feline actor had a good couple of years.
That's true. Unlike in the remake where they actually used pumas and some of the mountain lions and had them dyed black. Not to hurt them, just for the story, so to speak. I take it with the brownstone and her amazing art, she's clearly very successful at this.
She must be.
And her schedule seems to be very
Flexible.
appropriate.
Yeah, let's say appropriate.
To me, this is a turning point in the film.
With the bird.
Well, I think it says everything about what's to come. Because she's playful and almost innocent.
And it goes very badly.
But all this does, in a lot of ways, is just reinforce her entire idea about who she is, about the evil that lies within.
So she doesn't want to do any harm, but she can't help it.
It's in her nature.
Yep. That fear that no matter what you try to do, no matter who you try to be, you're going to hurt others.
It's like the things you touch, you can only bring pain to.
Right.
Even though clearly it's a figment of her imagination. Here's truth to support it, which is horrible for her, I guess. But Ollie's been safe so far.
So far.
No kissing or anything. He's good.
Goes and visits our leopard friend. Just tosses it right in. So do you think he doesn't notice that she's clearly despondent, or does he notice and is choosing to gloss over it?
Well, I think if he's trying to give her the space and the time, like he said earlier, maybe he's just taking baby steps.
Sure.
The sherry's a great icebreaker, I would think. I mean, you would think.
Yeah.
And she's almost saying, so you're really not paying attention at all.
Well, she's not wrong.
And that's one of the things that she seems to be, from the beginning of the film, a prisoner of herself. Even from the open.
Sure.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah, it's the aw shucks thing.
Right.
I guess that's what does it for some of these ladies.
I can't have any problems.
Yeah.
My life is charmed.
And it's like he's so committed to this charmed life that he's been living that he can't even go, well, clearly I may think this is silly, but this is clearly real to you.
That's another great point about Lewton, is he's constantly giving you evidence, the audience at least, of all the truth, and allowing the characters in the film not to see it at all.
Right.
Even though we clearly know what's going on.
Irena. See, okay. He, to his credit, finally trying a different tack.
Well, I think this is where another turning point in the film with the doctor. I think that's a huge.
That doctor,
But
yeah.
I think that's a huge thing because he's a critical character in terms of the story. Well, don't be you don't need to roll your eyes.
I didn't roll my eyes. I'm not eye rolling.
He's a critical character in the sense that that's the reason why they go for his help, thinking that this is a serious problem. It's just that they clearly chose the wrong doctor.
Yeah.
They chose the doctor that was like, well, I think I'm going to serve my needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is okay. That's kind of how life is. So. As we're introduced to this new character, I think it's important to remember that when this film came out, which we haven't said anything about, the impact, its success was largely due to the fact that, especially because of Val Lewton, there was no other films like this at the time. There was, and critics would quickly jump on the fact that he's bringing in psychology, horror, and the Panther, all these things that are like typical of monster movies
Right.
of the time.
Right.
but yet it's nothing like a monster movie. It's a complete, on the surface, it looks like any movie, really. Everything is just beneath the surface.
Well, and you and I have talked a little bit about what the expectations of his superiors were when they brought him on to run the horror unit at RKO, and it sounds like, based on the research I've done, it sounds like really their chief concern was, we want to make these movies quickly, we want to make them cheaply, and if we can, we want to replicate the success that, say, Universal had the previous decade.
And it has a formula like the Universal, so we've got to have the scare stuff, and they couldn't figure this out, but yet the audience told them it's dead on. It's because it was something that was very unique.
Well, it was something they gave the audiences something they didn't know they wanted yet.
And incredibly frugal.
Yes.
The way that they shoot everything, the way that they set everything up.
Well, and there is, they had to work, Lewton on all of these horror movies for RKO had to work within a very tight set of parameters, but there is that mentality of your limitations will foster your creativity because you have to be creative to get the job done around the limitations you have.
And getting back to what we were speaking of earlier, what I had mentioned about Jacques Tourneur, the director, who, of course, directed the great noir Out of the Past.
Yes.
Kirk Douglas and Robert Mitchum. Everything that he's great at is in this film, and I wouldn't even really call this a noir, even though it looks like a noir.
Sure.
But like you said about the budgetary restrictions and in any of the limitations that he was given, in every sense they exploit them. Every turn here is a surprise. Every moment is something that keeps the audience incredibly engaged. There's no dry moments. There's no weak moments. There's no static. Everything is a surprise or a burst.
Yes.
Doctors, darkness, everything keeps moving one way, and I really give the credit to Jacques Tourneur for that because he had this very, for lack of a better term, French sensibility that he brought to this, and Lewton loved it. And they were definitely collaborators in that sense.
Yes. And Oliver just has this look on his face like,
Is this the girl from work?
the girl from our department.
The girl that played with the cat? And I think she's great. I really like her a lot.
Everybody in this movie is very, very excellent in the roles they were cast in. And see, Oliver clearly wishing this went as well as it went in his head.
Well, he means well.
He means so well.
Kind of a one-sided marriage, sort of.
A little bit.
But like he said, take as much time as you need. And I love the fact that she's next to the zoo and you can hear the roars. It's just classic stuff. Also very frugal. You don't have to show anything. It's just audio.
You just get the sound effects. I mean, you'll have the occasional shot like this where you actually see some animals milling about.
But the tone is really smart.
And even the way those big cats in the background are shot, the way they're moving, they look like shadows.
Oh, absolutely. She's written so mysteriously.
See, all right, and there's moments like that make me go, maybe I'm being a little hard on poor Oliver Reed.
Wait, he already punched her in the chin at the restaurant, and now he just kind of touched. It's like, is that like his little sister or is that his wife? I'm a little bit confused.
but I believe it is this scene that just undoes him for me.
This scene?
I believe it's this scene. This is the scene where he talks about how he's never been unhappy before, no? Water cooler conversation.
My kind of girl.
Mm-hmm. This right here. So there's a line, and I'm not sure that Oliver knows where that line is between my life has been so charmed and now for the first time I'm experiencing this problem and it's affecting me so deeply. That's one side of it. The other side of it is I've never had to deal with problems. Irena has problems. I have to deal with them, and that's making me unhappy, and I don't like it.
Well, we also find out here that she clearly has got feelings for him.
Right.
Not that it wasn't pretty obvious already, but you know, he brought all this upon himself. We saw the opening of the film. He approached her.
He pursues her, yeah.
Like, a lot. And then he ends up with both girls.
In a sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's all good. It's the triangle.
But too, like, there's something in a way childlike about Oliver as well, as if he is not prepared for the fact that in an adult relationship, sometimes because you care about the other person, you will have to be steadfast and help them through their problems, even if it's not something you can directly relate to. Now, granted, most relationships, to the best of my knowledge, don't involve issues of, say, one party transforming into a cat monster. But regardless, to me, it's like I wasn't prepared for turbulence in this relationship. There are problems. I don't feel like dealing with this. Hey, you're here. You're nice.
Well, in a lot of ways, you kind of set up something that's very perfect for him, being the charmed boy.
Right.
The real relationship, the adult relationship, is with her. He's known her forever. He's worked with her. She's clearly an adult. He respects her. It's almost as if like the whole thing with this supposed cat person is almost like a litmus test to see how basically he can kind of figure this whole thing out.
Sure.
And in a lot of ways, he's tested only in the sense that he's never, like you said, had an adult relationship. It's almost like it's a precursor to the real relationship.
Sure. I agree that of the three main characters, Alice is certainly the most adult. I still, but again, it comes back to I don't really know what she sees in this man who has such a little boy mentality.
Well, you know, sometimes we are attracted to what's around us.
Sure, proximity too, and they've been working in that office together for a while. The way when he's talking about his life, he goes, "Oh, I had such great times at school and in the office with you."
She's so concerned about him when he clearly has this problem with another woman. Most women would step back. She steps forward. All she wants to do is help because she really likes him, which even bothers you more, clearly, because you don't see any draw with him.
But that's actually...
Proximity's not enough for you.
Proximity makes total sense. That, what you just said, makes even more sense, because if you look at the way he deals with the relationship with Irena, he's sincere in what he says, but a lot of the time it's...
But he doesn't mean it. Because to him it's like a campfire story, it's all going to go away.
And he's still thinking
He's just waiting.
He's still thinking about him. He's still thinking about how it's affecting him. And here comes Alice, who's also thinking about how it's affecting him.
But if we're going to talk about selfish characters...
Sure.
There is no more character more selfish than Dr. Judd.
This doctor.
It's almost as if like I see the hat, but there's horns. And I like that. I think that's good, because I think that helps the movie. Helps the story.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's really smart. And she's really smart, too, which she never gets to show with Ollie.
Right.
She gets to show how she really wants to be everything to him.
Right.
Which is never going to clearly happen. But with him, it can go tit for tat. They're very smart. They're very sharp.
Yes. what does she do? Because we see her making all of these portraits.
She's crystal clear at the beginning that she's not an artist.
Right.
She declares, because of his interest, he's like, well, I've never met an artist. Well, I'm not an artist. She wants clearly nothing to do with him, and then of course it's time for tea. She does, because she sees something in him that clearly, I guess Alice does too, that you can't possibly see.
I just don't.
Because it's not proximity. He meets her basically at the zoo.
Right. Well, it makes more sense for me in Irena's case because she.
Now you see, he thinks at this point that he knows her.
Right.
Which is a huge mistake.
Right. I can imagine Irena being very lonely and very desperate for a connection.
With any human being?
With anyone.
But she has such a strong connection in a very dark way with the doctor.
Sure.
They very much speak the same language. She very much does not want to be looked at as a patient.
Right.
Because she is smart in that sense. She's certainly not going to let him take advantage of her.
Not for lack of trying.
Well, we have to take baby steps. We have to get there. But I know what you mean. And see, everything's always through doors. Everything's very structured in that way. Everything has to go forward. It's very specific. Because she was surprised by him, like, oh, do you need to get in here? It's like everything's always kind of like... It's a type of journey.
Yes. When did trench coats and fedoras go out of style?
Late 40s, early 50s?
Yeah. Because now I'm thinking, like...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I remember watching Le Samurai, the Melville movie, which I love, but the way Alain Delon is dressed in that movie is the same, that noirish trench coat and
the
fedora.
gloves.
But it's even then, in the 60s, when that movie came out, even then it was intentionally anachronistic.
Oh, absolutely. And the gloves are editor's gloves, by the way. In Le Samurai, those are editor's gloves.
Did not know that.
She wants him to herself and doesn't want to share him, but even she can't have him. So it's like there isn't any character in this film that doesn't have a huge problem or an obstacle.
Sure.
Even though they all seem pretty light, they're not.
The doctor doesn't think he has an obstacle for a while.
Well, the doctor's know-it-all. Not just because he's a doctor, but because he feels like, I know exactly who these people are.
Right.
He never sees it coming.
Chartreuse.
And the restaurant that he's eating at is a cultural. They're having gumbo. Everything's like Louisiana. Everything's very
Yes.
specific, much like the remake. Has all that flavor to it.
The remake has we talked a little bit earlier about the fact that it takes all of the ideas that are there at the core of this movie and just it modernizes them, but then also follows them to, in many cases, their most logical but extreme conclusion. And there's this concept that, as far as I know, does not exist in this movie at all, that the only way to combat the cat person curse, if you will, is to mate with another cat person. And because, at least in that movie, as far as we know, the cat people that we meet are direct blood relatives. There's a very strong current of incest that runs through that movie as well.
Well, I'll go one better on you, not to even remotely disagree. Incest is absent in the original Cat People. It is flourishing in the remake.
Yes.
It's in a lot of ways what the entire remake is about, to some degree. About the ancestral thing in that film has a lot to do with the bloodline, clearly, of the family.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And incest is almost preferred. This has a different take on the ancestral part, which has much more to do with the culture and mythology. The other one, like you said, is much more about the relationships. And, of course, the rules that they set up. The only way you can do that is to mate and all these things, which are kind of like undefined.
Right.
I'm not saying this is simple at all, but it's definitely a little bit more blunt about that. It doesn't have that aspect to it. As a matter of fact, you actually said it better than I did. You make out the Ollie character to be such a simpleton, and one of the reasons why he is because these other characters, the Allison, of course, the Simone Simon,
Irena,
they're so far ahead of him in every way.
Yes.
And her jealousy, which I think we're about to see kind of played out here, is so intense, almost because she can't be anything like her.
Right.
It's impossible for her to be that girl. And she even says at the restaurant, "Oh, if you want to know anything about this city, just say the word. I know it like back of my hand. I've got all the answers for you." And that's great for her as a friend, but that's not really the friend she wants.
Right.
Because she sees her as a threat, clearly.
Oh, and right about here, when it happens, it's going to happen in a second. The bus.
But what was right before the bus?
That sound. What
was that sound?
Well, we don't know.
But what did you hear?
It's meant to sound like the leopard.
The growl of a panther. Absolutely. And I think that those touches are so subtle, but they make the film.
Well, and that became an iconic technique, and they call it the Lewton bus specifically because of it was that we saw the bus just now.
Sure.
But if you look at the way I've heard the term Lewton bus defined is you break up tension in a sequence with essentially a boom moment.
Sure.
Which makes the Lewton bus is, if you will, the grandfather of the technique of using jump scares, which has become so overdone in horror movies, especially more recently.
Well, it's pedestrian. It's
easy.
It certainly shows no creativity at all.
Unless it's earned.
Now, what did you think of that?
Of which specifically?
The paws turning into shoe prints.
It makes a strong case for something out of the ordinary, I would venture to say.
Well, I would go even one further and say that the greatest part about the creativity in this film is you show everything without showing anything. Because you don't need, unlike the remake, you don't need to see any type of transformative sequence. You've just been shown. This is what it is. The sheep are taken out. Here are the paw prints. They turn into shoe prints. I think even though it seems very obvious to any of, I'm sure the audiences at home that are watching this, it's at the time groundbreaking.
Oh yeah. But what's interesting too, on top of that, is that the bloody paw prints don't turn into bloody human footprints. They turn into bloody shoe prints. So if we are meant to take from this that she did transform into a leopard and transform back, her clothes apparently transform along with her. Which is not an important point, certainly, but interesting.
But I think that there's a certain suspension of belief.
Oh, yeah.
In any fantasy film, which the book that you and I were talking about, the one on him, the Dreams of Darkness, the fantasy is the word they use most when they're talking about Val's films.
Sure.
You mentioned Leopard Man earlier, and of course Curse of the Cat People and the body statue and stuff. It seems to me that that's really where his focus is. So when you say, it seems like that, I think that you have to kind of make that jump maybe a little bit, which maybe you don't want to make that jump.
I do. No, I'm tickled by the idea that her shoes on her feet transform into paws.
But that's part of the idea.
Oh, yeah.
Because she believes in something that's so stunning and so ridiculous to everybody. Here we are, the audience, we get to know it's the truth.
Right.
We get to be in with her on it, whereas everybody else is rejecting it.
Yes.
And it's odd because Dr. Judd has the inside track, and he can't help himself.
Right.
He could help her.
Right, but he would rather...
He'd rather help her?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I thought this was just amazing.
This hypnosis sequence with the animated cats.
Well, I think this was another thing we were talking about, how the superiors were like, we really don't have any idea what you're doing, and I don't think the audience is really going to understand this. I think it's inspired.
But can you imagine being somebody higher up at RKO and seeing these rushes and not having context for them?
But it's so fantastic that the context is so clear to the audience. Because
yes.
Clearly they foresaw everything. I think it's very smart. And there's this ambiguity with the key, as if maybe it wasn't her. There's all these. That's one of the things that kind of keeps you guessing, I guess. Maybe not you, of course, but
Maybe not. Maybe not.
most audience
certainly.
members, the ambiguity was a big part of how he tried to put forth all the films during his RKO tenure. What does that say to you?
We're not sending you away. We just don't want you to be bored. He's very openly talking to her like a child now.
With someone else who she's very threatened by.
Yep.
And who even feels as though her intimacy has been revealed to her. This is really the threesome you want to go out with, I guess. Which only contributes to her anger towards her.
Right.
Her hatred of her. You could even say she stalks her. I was probably 17 when I saw this, and to me this was the scene that really stood out to me.
And there's a version of this stalking sequence with the pool and all of that in the remake.
Of course.
Key difference being
with the beautiful Annette O'Toole.
Right. Key difference being in Schrader's version, she is topless.
Well, I think there's a little more to it than that.
There's certainly a little more to it.
If you want to simplify it, I'm not going to get in your way.
There is certainly more to it.
I truly also feel that in this original, it's so much more intricate, so much more layered, so many more details, and there's so much more to it. It adds a certain amount of realism to it, whereas in the Schrader version, not that it's not fun, it's very broad compared to this.
Yes.
This is very specific.
I've only ever marginally understood the decision to seek safety by jumping into the pool.
Marginally?
Marginally. And it only goes as far as cats don't like water.
Which clearly is not the case.
Right. But I can understand
That's you being in the margin, I guess. With
That's-
your confusion.
Yeah, that's me going, maybe, but
But I think with what we were talking about earlier, I think with a lot of horror films, especially like you said, the jump scares, I think that's what they're going for.
sure.
So I think the suspension of belief, like you said, they're going to go ahead and disallow any, as you put it, logic, even though clearly in that margin you're in, it's very irritating to you. I can see that. Because you're right, it's like the cat would just jump in the water. It's not like that would be a problem for the cat. But in this film, that's the sanctuary, the
Sure.
water. And it's very much the same in the remake.
Yes.
I truly feel that this is way better done than the remake, with her showing up and the way that she is. What's wrong? Mrs. Reed coming in unexpectedly, right before I heard the panther coming down the stairs, but I won't go into that. What do you think of that accent?
I like the.
Did I ask the wrong question?
No, I'm wondering. What do I feel about this accent? I like it. I don't know. Is this what region that is meant to be?
It disconnects her from every other character in the movie that could either hurt her or help her, including Ollie.
Sure.
So it makes her to be more exotic. To you, maybe not. Oh, don't worry. You're gonna get a bill. I can promise you that.
There it is.
There you have it. Because I've been in this triangle forever. And everything he says is right.
Yes.
So not only do you know that he can solve the problem and that he's the solution, he's basically sitting here holding the key to everything. And he could be the good guy.
He could.
He could fix everything.
But he is certainly more sinister than that. And I can't imagine too.
Sinister?
I'm gonna go sinister.
You're going to go sinister?
I'm gonna go sinister.
Well, for the record, I'd like to say I don't think he's a Batman villain. But he's bad news.
He is absolutely.
He's absolutely only in it for himself.
Yes.
And even though he has all the answers, he's only going to select what he feels is going to serve him, not really a patient or a cause.
Oh no, patient just means he gets a paycheck.
Much like perhaps a Batman villain.
Yeah.
Sinister.
To be fair, he does walk around with a weaponized cane, much like a Batman villain might.
I kind of almost wish I hadn't said anything. but you're absolutely right. And his nature, especially with her, is very sinister.
Yep.
Because he really feels like, unlike Ollie and even the girl, Alice,
Yes.
he really feels like she hears him,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the case.
There's the line, traipsing right over it. How often do you think Dr. Judd has found himself in this particular contest of wills with a patient?
Well, that's why I brought up the exotic nature of her. I
Sure.
think unlike most patients and unlike the Alice character, there's something, to him at least, that's very appealing to her that has nothing to do with the issues at hand.
Right.
It's almost as if she walked in his office in a bikini. He doesn't really see anything but this very exotic draw. And it's interesting that he brought up his cane as if somehow that would be protection, because he clearly thinks, just like Ollie, it's all campfire stories.
Right.
Which, it's great because the only one that really seems to have any idea that it's the truth is Alice. She's like, no, I'm pretty sure. And they push all the truth away. In all of his films, they do that. Until, clearly, the inevitable. He wants to have control over her.
Yeah. Well, now, effectively, he's threatening to have her institutionalized if she will not succumb to his advances.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, as not to succumb to his advice. Because it's through the advice that he's going to obviously have her to succumb to his advances. But she's not even taking the bite. She's not even into it. She's like, and even here he's still, playing the Romeo. Oh, you interest me. He wants to be the right guy.
Sure.
He's not.
He's not.
That's one of the other things I loved about Cat People when I first saw it is all the characters are so full. Whereas in a lot of these type of movies, they're supporting players.
Right.
And they're not. They're very realized in this. Here comes no surprise.
Yeah.
Surprise.
I've decided I really don't want to deal with your cat people nonsense anymore, and I'm shuffling off.
And he's like Dr. Judd too. He had all the answers and he had all the truth earlier on. He just made the decision almost to string her along to some degree.
Well, and both neither the Doctor nor Oliver are certainly at this point in the story in a position of being stalked or intimidated or in any way victimized or feeling victimized by Irena. Alice is the only one who's been in a situation where she feels like this might cause her personal harm.
But as he said, Dr. Judd, about the dueling wills, so to speak, that's what the girls are doing.
Sure.
And they're a lot more open about it. I mean, unless I'm mistaken, she changed into a panther and chased her to the pool, cut out her robe, and the guys, like you said, the simpleton and the Doctor, are just kind of like all. Not only is it campfire, it's, look, I've got this blade. It's like they're completely unaware.
Yep.
One of my favorite scenes right here. Are you ready? I want to prep the audience for it. It's classic. That to me is cinema. I think that's wonderful.
The claws on the cushion, yeah.
I can't even look at Ollie to save anymore. You destroyed him for me.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's just my reading of the guy when I.
But you're right, because they're all different. You're right.
And again, I think these choices were made intentionally, and I think all of it is executed incredibly well. It adds up, I believe, intentionally to a guy that just not my type of guy.
But no, when you say that he's a simpleton, or maybe I said he was a simpleton, you're right, because only through being a simpleton can he make the discovery that he makes. If he's anybody else, we can't believe it. If, for example, not to give you any type of compliment, but if he's you can't make it that far. You can't be where he's at here because you already have the wisdom to know something more. So he has to be, as you said, that carefully created character, or else he can't have the discovery. No, you're absolutely right. I'm agreeing with you.
Sure.
I feel like there's sarcasm in your...
No, I get what you're saying. I just think it's interesting to equate... I understand entirely what you meant by it, but equating wisdom to being more willing to buy into a transformation cat monster story.
Oh, but they're all doing that.
Oh, yeah.
She's buying into the fact that she's got this evil in her.
Right.
He's clearly buying in that he's going to be able to overcome her in a masculine, almost romantic way. He was trying to overcome the idea that he was going to marry her and make her a good wife.
Sure.
And then he had... I mean, all these problems that everybody has are analytical.
Yes.
To the reality. And they ignore the reality. Like you said, the only one that has any clue is Alice, who's like,
right.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, and
they just blow it off.
Exactly what you were saying. It's that they're so ready and so willing to buy into the stories they're telling themselves. And whether or not that was true of Alice for most of the movie, once we get to that sequence where she's being stalked by something, she can't see it, but once she's being stalked by something, whatever story she may have been telling herself is punctured.
I wanted to ask you what you thought of this.
Of what part specifically?
Well, this sequence here where he returns to get his item that he supposedly accidentally left behind,
right,
so that he can unlock the setup for later. Things like this usually are not in movies.
Sure.
Which it helps define him even that much more. Playing back to your word that you used earlier, I have to now completely agree. That's a sinister move.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you 100% because that's somebody who's not only is he just in it for himself, but he's seeing the short game, and only he's in that game. They're not in that game at all.
Nope.
If anything, excluded completely. the lighting is just, I think, just so fantastic for the time and for what it is. So simple.
He's just staring blankly.
Well, that plays into what you said, though. He has to be that guy.
It's great
because he's not aware. It's almost like the entire film, even from the opening, they're leading him.
Yep.
And you even said it better than I did at the water cooler. He's like, I've never had a problem in my life. And nothing to me seems silly in this movie. Nothing's like a cliche. It's all very. I totally buy into all of it.
I think it all works within the context of the story they're telling.
Absolutely.
I agree.
But I know that sometimes, maybe not younger audiences, but some people would say, "Oh, I've seen this type of stuff 1,000 times." I kind of don't think you have. I think this is a real standout.
Well, and I agree with you on that point, absolutely. But even in cases where you are seeing something that, in an older movie that maybe you have seen done
Sure.
and aped 1,000 times since, context is so very important when you're watching movies that were made before 1980. Because
Or 1960.
Or 1960. Well, exactly. You have to bear in mind that what you're seeing is something that had never been done. Yes, you've seen it since, but it had never been
Do you like
done.
the cross motif? You think that's a nice touch?
It's nice and subtle, but extremely well incorporated.
But clearly so subtle because it's not referenced like as if we're talking about God or anything.
Right.
But it's symbolically it's there. It's just enough.
Yep.
It's the right touch. I was reading in the book about how Lewton really got super involved in his handling of each of the pictures. You mentioned the Leopard Man and the other projects, including this one, and it seems to me like he just had a great bit of luck with not only Jacques Tourneur but Robert Wise and Robeson. These people, if you could say anything in all the films, it's a common goal, and I think they represent that in a lot of ways. That's why I think we're so lucky to have somebody like that as a producer. They really understood the idea of all the narratives, not just the horror that we're looking at. Told you that was my type of girl.
Oh, she's wonderful. And in these moments before his phone rings here, just the doctor silently pacing around his quarters here, and the expression on his face says so much to me about his state of mind at that moment. And it's a combination of him. His gears are always turning, and he's always very satisfied with himself, and he's very satisfied with the way he's turning his own gears.
Well, he feels as though he's in control. And there's an interesting line here from her that she says to Ollie here about. So she completely sees what has happened, or at least hears what has happened. And like you had made the comment, he's so full of himself. What is, to occur, he could never see coming.
Yeah. What a creep.
Do you not like doctors either?
I would certainly not like to be Dr. Judd's patient.
It's also inferred here, much like you were talking about earlier, like the remake, that anger and that fear aspect plays a critical role in the change.
Sure.
In the becoming this creature.
Well,
Because it wasn't just anger at him,
Right.
but it's also fear, which she's basically, that's the entire film. That's how she's been whenever she's not, in a sense, the cat.
Sure. Well, any extreme emotional state causing you to lose control, which is a very human fear to have.
Being an enormous fan, I don't know how you feel about it, since I know so little of your taste in modern cinema. I do. I know very little. Choreography is a huge deal to me, and I feel that they did such a masterful job, not just with the shadows, but with this one sequence with the leopard. It's just, to me, it's as good as anything that's done today.
Agreed.
For sure.
Agreed. And with fewer resources to do it.
Which I think only helps.
Oh, yeah.
In every way.
So, Dr. Judd has been done in. Interestingly...
And as an audience member, I'm kind of okay with that.
Oh, yeah. I think we're all better off in a world minus Dr. Judd. Although, there was the movie The Seventh Victim, which came out the next year, where the same actor, Tom Conway, plays Dr. Judd again. But there's certainly no reference to the events of Cat People. There's no reference to the fact that we saw this character die gruesomely in another earlier film. So I'm wondering, maybe Seventh Victim is a very subtle Cat People prequel, all taking place in the Lewton verse.
I would say extremely subtle. But I know where you're going. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, look at Sue Ellen. She's all over that.
She's getting ready to investigate, yeah.
She's like, I want to check it all out.
There is a whole other story in here somewhere about Sue Ellen, the unlikely master detective, that we'll never get to see.
To me, the way they use the actual leopards, panthers in this film, it's so powerful because it's so sparingly done.
Yes.
And it basically sells everything about her, about the ancestral place that she came from, everything. And because of this, it's an explanation for all these mysterious things. It's almost like a get out of jail free card for the story. Even though we know better.
Right. Large cat escapes to go on to its
But now that detective
career.
you were talking about, Sue Ellen,
Oh,
now
no,
everything can be explained away
Right.
with this.
Yep.
So now what we saw, the prints change and all the things that we as an audience are privy to, all the realistic people can be saying, oh, it's because the cat that got out. That's what I can explain everything away, including the pool sequence.
Yep.
Oh, that's what it was.
It was just this actual cat that was loose.
Supposedly the common sense, right?
Yeah. It is. She never lied to us. Is ultimately very, very tragic.
I love that in line. I know you're not a big Ollie fan, but that to me is the definition of the movie.
She never lied to us?
Absolutely.
Well, he wakes up a little bit finally in that moment.
Once again, another card.
My world, both parts, and both parts must die, which ties back into what you were saying, the line of the doctors about the
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
the dueling aspects. Yeah, so that was Cat People,
From 1942.
1942. Val Lewton. I'm a fan. I think you're a fan as well.
Huge fan.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us for our watch along of Cat People. You can find me, Lex Michael, on Twitter, Instagram, all the things at the Lex Michael.
At Twitter, at Byron Lee? Is that what you said it was?
That was, yeah, I believe that's your Twitter. Your Twitter's at Byron Lee.
Byron Lee, Leigh. Sorry.
Yeah, and join us on Historic Hollywood every week, where we celebrate the cinema of yesteryear and the people who made it. And for this watch along, I think that's going to wrap things up. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, Christian Harloff, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of its owners or principals.